So this is another episode of Business Best by Mike Byrnes. That's me. Again, hopefully we'll bring you some best practices for your business to help increase its success. Last time we were talking about client research and we're talking about focus groups in particular and ran out of time. So we're going to dive right back in with focus groups. Some of the really interesting things that you can learn in a focus group are difficult conversations. I got hired once to talk about raising fees. And again, this is where you don't want to have a facilitator that doesn't know what they're doing. But you bring them in, bring that person in and they get railroaded and the clients leave the research all mad that the fees are going to go up. That could be a horrible thing, right? So we worked on the fee work, showed some comparisons within the industry, showed about how the client service model had expanded and more services were being offered, how the actual services that did exist have become more intense and more things are going to be done and they were going to get more comprehensive service across the board. And so by the time that research got to the question and showing the fees, they kind of understood what was going to happen. That research was really, really valuable. The retention rate was gigantic when the fees went up. It actually, with the biggest clients, it was such a cool retention tool to do this focus group because these people got to see it before it happened. You know, imagine they get a letter and they say, oh, the fees are going up, and they didn't have any say in it at all. There's no pre-conversation. There's nothing. They're going to flip out, right? And they're going to have a negative reaction. So this was kind of an interesting way to say, hey, what do you think if these fees increase? You know, obviously, if that feedback came back that, hey, we're just no way we're going to tolerate an increase in fees, then you would know business-wise that it's a big risk to do this. You might get a couple people that would say, hey, by the way, we would leave. So then you got to do the mathematical formula of like, well, if you're going to lose X, but you're going to gain Y in new additional revenue, would they offset and would it be something good for the long run and calculate not just a 1 year revenue goal, but look at the profitability for years and years and years to come. It might still be worth it. But that type of information, you can't just guess that. You kind of have to have the research to know before you go into something. So that was one that was an interesting topic. Another topic that you might want to think about is, you know, you got hired to talk about additional services that would be added on to what you already offer. There can be a whole bunch of different things that you can do. But if you just guess and your top clients aren't going to be excited about those additional services, is it worth all the effort to do it? Fees, again, could be an issue. What does that look like? So it's really great if you're going to say, hey, we're thinking about adding some new services. What would they be? What would you choose? What would be the hierarchy? If you have these 10 things, what would you want the most? And oh, by the way, if you did want that, what would be the value to you? Would you be able to pay more money for that? What would that look like? That is a really, really healthy discussion, and that's probably one that you want to have with your best clients, right? Some clients you might have at the bottom of your book that you just don't care about as much. That's a terrible thing to say, but it's just not as much of a risk if you lose them. I hope you care about them, but from a business perspective, you really want to know what your best clients think and be really on top of that. Examples of other focus group kind of topics, had one client that was going to be retiring, and it was a 10-person firm, maybe a little bit bigger. And so the research was subtly about, there was no announcement that person was going to retire, but it was subtly about like, what would you think if this most important person retired? And so we had a question in there just to clarify that you know where this research was going to go was, who is the most valuable person in this firm? And then there was kind of a wording on a second one that said, who would you be most concerned with if that person left the firm? And the number one result in both of those questions was about the receptionist because the receptionist had such a valuable interaction with those prospects and clients when they came in. Obviously, the feedback in this case was from the clients, but they had no idea the importance that this person had to the client relationship. And the fact that those answers came in was a little bit mind-blowing for the person that had hired me to do the research. But it also gave that person a little bit more of a comfort level in figuring out, you know what, it is okay to let go of some of the control of the firm. And then we devised a phase-out succession plan type of retirement plan for that person. And actually that survey work that we did in the focus group really gave that person, the owner, the major owner, the comfort to do what he just couldn't do on his own. He was too afraid to leave. He just thought he was too valuable to his clients. So not to say he wasn't super, super valuable, but that type of research was really helpful. If he had gotten the results of saying, 90% of the clients are going to leave because that person left, obviously there would have been a different business plan and future for that organization. But that person really was a little bit of an eye-opener and a healthy one. One thing I will say with focus groups is you're giving those clients extra access to give you input. So one, it's great just to get the extra ability to interact with them on a more frequent basis than you would in a normal client meeting. So super valuable to get to know them in those client meetings, but now imagine a little bit more of a casual interaction. Again, I had mentioned before, as a facilitator, I like to kick my client out so I can talk to their clients. But it doesn't mean you can't have a welcoming portion of the night, so a half an hour of a meet and greet, do name tags, introduce clients that might not know each other, kind of warm up the room a little bit, and then disappear for an hour to 2 hours, probably just a little over hours, the right time frame for a focus group. And again, I had said before, maybe you have 8 to 10 clients. Some are single, some maybe are married, some are in relationships. And then get them together after. Have a dinner, have a cocktail hour, take them to do something. It's a great opportunity to just let them know, like, wow, we appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day, your busy week, and coming here to give us feedback. So again, it's a great opportunity to connect with them and get to see them extra. But I can tell you, every single time I've been brought in to do a focus group, that client that brought me in has got more referrals than they got before. So it's not that the people in the room never gave referrals. They did, because they were the bigger clients, the ones that were the ones that were more likely to share feedback, good or bad. And you kind of don't want to bring people that are super quiet that aren't going to give you anything. Maybe that's the case, but the reality is when they leave, they have a vested interest in your success because they've talked about your business for an hour and a half. Let's say it's 90 minutes. Now when they leave, they're going to want to help you. And I almost always see a spike in referrals right after. I'd given the example of the fee increase. That was the one situation where I didn't see a spike in referrals, or I didn't get the information if that did happen. And obviously that's a little bit more of a delicate conversation. But the more generic types of research, obviously, these people are already close, and now they're closer because hopefully you listen to them. So it's not that you just hear the information that's gathered, but you actually listen. And we talked about it, or I talked about it in an earlier video, and that was about being able to be an active listener and taking that feedback. So now if you're kicked out of the room, the facilitator should give you a transcript if you have to have it, but take away everybody's names. I actually will have the people, if they have a name tag, have them take it off, because I never want them to ever feel like they're going to be tracked down for the feedback that they gave. And that the client that hires me, I will always say, this is anonymous information. You can't go on a witch hunt and say, hey, who said that? I can't believe they said that. And obviously, there's times where it's surprising. Like you might have thought it was client A, but it was actually client E that said it. And so it's kind of just a waste of time. And so create that comfortable environment in a focus group so they can share what they want to share. One other cool thing to do with the focus group, and this breaks the rule of having just the facilitator in the room, is actually when my client would give a presentation. And so this is where they would give the presentation, and we could have pauses, and then the person that gave the presentation is asked to leave the room. And people that give presentations, I'm one of them, it's a gift to give feedback, but it also hurts too, because people are more likely to want to give negative feedback, right? And so if you're putting yourself out there and you're giving a presentation, that's really when people could get defensive. So again, maybe you do it in 5-minute segments. Let's say it's a half an hour presentation, or you could let it run through the whole thing. But I will say, if you do let it run through the whole thing, that's the pro is you're going to get them the flavor of what the presentation will feel like, A to Z. But they might have had feedback in the first 5 minutes, and now they forgot it because you moved through too fast. So there's a pro and a con to doing that. But that's an interesting one to do. And again, it breaks the rule of letting the client that's hiring the facilitator in the room. Advisory boards are another type of research. And to me, that's a focus group that repeats. And so you want to have really valuable client input in these types of meetings because they can become a waste of time. Let's just say you created a schedule that would be every 2 months, and maybe 5 of them are business related, and the 6th one is just a celebration that they gave you feedback for a year. You don't have to have the same people in every advisory board meeting, but I think letting it run for a year or 2 with the same people can be really valuable. You might want to phase one out at a time, and just kind of like a nonprofit board, have some terms to it. But it really is up to the commitment from the client. They're volunteering their time. So some would die to do this on a regular basis. They have such a close relationship that they want to give this feedback. Others, they just don't have time to do it, so it's a burden on them. Those are the ones you want to have a shorter term or a shorter commitment. When you bring this advisory group together, this is where, I don't want to tell you who you should have in the room, but business executives, small business owners, other people that kind of think from a business perspective might be the right fit for this. Even retirees that have had some kind of business experience. And retirees are an interesting group because they might want to keep the brain power working and stay sharp. This could be that thing that they do rather than play golf or go to the beach or go on trips. So they might really think this is a valuable use of their time, and they might appreciate you just by bringing them in. And that's a really interesting thing I said with focus groups is now these people have a vested interest in your success. So kind of being a little bit more selective with who you would bring in to this type of repeating focus group, it really is important. Just like a jury takes maybe a week and a big trial to decide who it is. You really need to put some thought into it and work with the facilitator to say who these people are, talk through it. Don't just kind of randomly pick them because they are responsible for the most profitability or they've been the longest tenured, or don't just come up with kind of a generic qualitative type of decision maker. Put some thought into it and really think about the pros and cons of bringing this group together. The advisory group, this is one that you're going to want to think about a cadence to the research too, because they're going to be committed. So this is where you might want to have like a whole marketing rebranding, and you bring them in early to talk about here's what we're trying to accomplish, here's our target market, here's some concepts of what the brand might be from a higher level, from the name of the company to the tagline to, this might be an example of you're bringing 2 organizations together and you have to do a total rebrand. Letting them in early is really cool because they're going to be more likely to stay with you, but they're going to feel like they had a vested interest in your success because they helped shape the new company. Like, how cool is that? So maybe that's phase 1 of the research. Then phase 2 is like, all right, let's look at some material. Here's what a flyer or brochure would look like. Here's what the website might look like. The next meeting might be, here's the e-newsletter. Here's what social media would be like. Here's some different advertising campaigns, and so on. You start to think about PR and all the different branches of this, and how does it impact service? How does it impact business decisions? Like, if you're a company that doesn't have to rebrand, but you're thinking about it, is it worth it? Are you going to have to spend $100,000 in rebranding, from business cards to letterhead to websites to office signage or whatever it might be? Help them, understand the full weight of this business decision, the more inputs that they have, if they're valuable, smart people, the better they're going to help shape your decision. I said it earlier in earlier videos, you have to be willing to listen to the research and make changes. You can't just have this group, if they give you a whole bunch of great feedback and you don't take any of it, that's a business risk. So you have to be willing to take their research, maybe even if you don't like it. So you have to weigh that. The reality is, their advisory group is investing the most amount of time to help you succeed and give you this input. So their feedback should be even more important. One kind of cool thing you might want to do with an advisory group is get them involved early and help them shape a survey that would go to your whole client base. That's kind of cool because you can kind of get from their perspective how they would react to different questions. Let's say you come up with 20 questions. Here's the 10 that we should use, and here's how they should be worded. And then, oh, by the way, the next advisory group meeting is going to be analyzing the data and looking at the different answers that come in. How cool is that to have some really smart business minds that care about what you do, and they get their own opinions based on their one-on-one interactions, but now they're kind of seeing all these results. You have to be careful to take off names so you're not giving away anything from a privacy perspective, but that's kind of a cool technique that you might want to think about too. All right, I had said in an earlier video there were 8 techniques, and there's even more for client research, but one of them now is going to be AI. There are some really cool things happening now where maybe a little bit scary, but you can get even more information based on what's out in the online world of more information about your clients, wealth, professions, like all types of things, connections, etc. So you're going to see AI kind of revolutionize that background data that you would normally have to research on your own. And now AI is going to provide that information to you. And by the way, super, super helpful from a prospecting standpoint. We'll talk about AI more in future videos and other conversations, but I just want to let you know that that's one to really keep your eye out on and be aware that's going to help you from a client research standpoint. Email is an interesting one too. So one of the things that you shouldn't do if you use email is just lump everybody into one segment: prospects, clients, old, young, maybe institutional types of clients or retail types of clients or whatever they might be. The more you can sub-segment them, the better. And then test and learn. You put out this information. The really cool thing about email, go off on email a little for a minute, is you should have little teasers in your email to click through to something. So I know that some e-newsletters blast out all the content, and there's a pro and con to that, but the con is that you're not going to get click-through rates. You're only going to get open rates. If somebody opens an email, they might be just opening it to delete it. Honestly, you don't really know. Or sometimes I think that there's some cybersecurity tools that open the emails to scan them, and so you get kind of a false positive that somebody clicked on something. So open rates isn't really the most powerful metric in an email marketing campaign. The reality is click-through rates. So I'm a big believer of having a picture that's clickable, a title, and then maybe a sentence or two to tease them, to click them, to take some action, whether it's to go to your website or some PR or whatever it might be. That click-through rate then monitors interest, right? So let's say you test 3 different topics, you click on it as a client, then the marketing person that gets this should see some learnings about what are those things that are popular, again, for that segment. So you want your emails, you might want to test, like, here's what a real generic one would be. Here's what clients like to click on. Here's what prospects like to click on. But you can be more advanced to be like, here's what the males want to click on. Here's what the females want to click on. Oh, here's what the G1, the older generation, wants to click on. Here's what the younger generation, maybe G3, wants to click on if they're old enough. And what does that look like? All kinds of amazing learnings can come from that type of research. And a lot of times, if a firm's big enough, it's kind of a junior marketing person that's getting that information. So let's say they're a medium-sized company with 20 to 25 people in it. They might have a director of marketing. They might not. They might have a kind of a marketing assistant type of role. whatever it might be, a lot of times that feedback, that research that they're getting on that type of information is not bubbling up. And so that is really, really important. Actually, these tools like a Constant Contact or MailChimp or whatever it might be will give you some really valuable information all the way down to the client. So you'll know who clicks on what, when, how often. You might see a client click on something 5 times. I'm like, what is going on there? That topic was really of interest. If you're not doing that A/B testing too, where you're putting out title A versus title B and seeing which ones open more, subject line A or subject line B and seeing which ones clicked on more, you're also not going to be better. Marketing is very scientific. The more of this kind of testing and research, the more you're going to be more successful. So email marketing can be really valuable. Don't forget that as a way to research your clients. Websites can be fantastic too. You can start to see where people click, where they spend their time. You can kind of correlate it sometimes with the e-newsletter blast that goes just to your clients. Then you can measure website traffic and kind of assume that was based on what the clients were doing. You could delay it and send a prospect's email maybe a week later or days later, so then you could kind of guess that website traffic was based on that e-news blast or whatever. But let's say you start to see that they click on these 5 things, and oh, by the way, they take this action, this call to action, or what, maybe this freemium or whatever it is. You can really start to learn from your clients from a marketing standpoint too, what they like to do online, and then track that back. The other thing I would say, like with websites, is let's say you're going to do a website redesign. One thing is you could get, this is where a focus group might be helpful, but you can do a usability thing. So you can say, here's all the pieces of the website, put them on little stickies, and have them build it on a wall. Have them each individually build it on their wall. Where does this stuff make sense? Where should this be categorized? How should this be displayed? And then gather it all together. And you're going to start to see some really cool thought process. That's going to be some really cool feedback to hear their thoughts on where that stuff should be laid out. And guess what? We can all guess this stuff. Marketers in an ivory tower are probably the most dangerous people from a marketing standpoint. So the more you can get the input from your clients and sometimes even your prospects, the more likely you are to make successful decisions. So now we've talked about different techniques of ways to get the research, but let's talk about kind of the stages of clients and where you might want to do different types of research. So it obviously starts when they're a prospect. A prospective client is just becoming familiar with you. So you can start to figure out from a prospect standpoint, if you have their information, how familiar were they with you? What was the one thing that triggered them becoming knowledgeable about you? PR, word of mouth, was it an ad? What was it? Was it a few things? The more you can kind of research that, the more you kind of understand how they get into the pipeline. In that courting piece, that is a really, really valuable time to get to know what's working in your process. And so even if you have their information as a prospect and they leave you and they don't hire you, wow, hire an independent facilitator and hopefully ask that they'll give you permission to give you feedback. They're comparing you against the relationship they might have had before, and now they're comparing you against a set of competitors. They probably have picked to go somewhere else, or maybe they're staying with the option they had before. Super, super valuable information. Maybe what was the thing that caused them not to stay? Maybe the person they talked to was arrogant. Maybe it was too confusing. Maybe it was not empathetic enough, didn't listen enough. I've heard all kinds of interesting things that will just help the sales process in the future. Wonderful to gather that information. Right as you close them, as they become a client, it's super valuable to know why did they pick you and what was their journey to get there. This is where you can see that, oh, by the way, maybe it was a word of mouth process, but that was just step one. The online research stuff is really what closed them. Or maybe it was just that they got a really great recommendation from a strategic alliance or an existing client, and that was the thing. Maybe they saw this one article that just wowed them because it spoke to them. Maybe it was PR. Maybe you looked more credible than the competition because you were exposed in the press and looked like you really knew what you were talking about. Videos are a super impactful thing when people are doing the research and courting you and trying to decide and make the decision. So really make sure to know early on that research when you just became a client. Why was that? Now you convert them to become clients. Another really, really valuable time to do it is all along the process, really, but you can't overdo it. But maybe it's a week later. What did you think of like how we spoke and how we talked about ourselves? What did you like? What did you dislike? And then go into 3 months from now, comparing us to the people that you used before. What's great? What's bad? Our onboarding process, that's the time you want to wow them to get them to those people that will give you referrals right out of the gate, right? Like, how could we improve that? What did you like? What did you not like? Was there something that was confusing? Super, super valuable information that could be there. All right, you got your loyalists. That's those people that will never leave. If you do find you have a retention issue, a wonderful, wonderful time. If you get somebody that gives you a 6 or lower, maybe even a 7 or lower on a client satisfaction, hire a facilitator to just ask them from a third-party standpoint, how are they doing? What could they improve? I guarantee if you take that thorn out of the side of that client that's unhappy, they can all of a sudden become the biggest raving fan and just like, boom, they've now become your biggest referral source. So something to think about how to work with them. All right, the loyalists that will never leave you. Why do they not give referrals? They're going to be with you for life. Why is that? Find that type of information. Oh, by the way, you do have that raving fan. They're advocates. Why is that? What could you do to help them facilitate more interactions? All kinds of really valuable information. Again, you lose a client at any piece of this. This is a wonderful, wonderful time to bring in a consultant to say, hey, can I ask you a couple questions? And just have a trained professional that knows kind of where to dig, where not to dig, and get that feedback. This is, again, something that somebody that just lost a client, they're going to want to react. They're going to want to try to save the business. Well, let's just say that business is gone. You just don't want it to happen to repeat again. So that's why you would hire that facilitator to try to do that research. That could be some of the most valuable research ever if you do have a retention problem. So to start to wrap it up, one of the things that research is great for is to save business. Obviously, you might become aware of a disgruntled client before anyone else does. You don't want to find out about that after they leave. And sometimes there's just things on the surface. We talked about them just giving warm, fuzzy feedback in a lot of cases that you're not going to find out unless you have that kind of third-party facilitator getting the research. Then I would also say, not only is it going to help you save business, but it can actually help you get a lot more business because now you can be really, off the charts with getting them to have a vested interest in your success, share ideas to improve. And you know what? Almost always you're going to see that the research is going to help you come closer to your clients. And what happens when they're happy and closer? They're going to give you more referrals. Again, this is Mike Byrnes. I am so happy to bring you another episode of Business Bests. Hopefully this is helping you become more successful. Thank you for listening in.